On this episode of Adventology, we're going to be talking about three things Christianity is not and what exactly Christianity is. On this episode of Adventology, we are going to be beginning a new series called Truth Seekers. I'm super excited to begin this new journey with you. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to our podcast, I want to encourage you to subscribe right now. You can like us and definitely feel free to leave a message in the comments if something that we said today touched your heart. Because what we really are about on this channel is about preparing you to be ready for Jesus. Everything we do is about that, and everything we talk about somehow connects back to that, because ultimately that is the most important thing, is to be ready for Jesus when he comes so that we can go home and live with him forever. And so part of that journey is actually figuring out what Christianity is. You know, there is a lot of misinformation out there, a lot of misperception out there about Christianity these days. A lot of people just don't even want to be affiliated with Christianity. I was just reading a Twitter post of somebody that I follow and respect, and noticed that he was removing Christian from his title in his blog because he felt like Christianity and the word Christian had so much baggage associated with it. He didn't want it to get in the way of his listeners hearing what he had to say. And so that really got me thinking. I mean, we have a country today full of people who are hungry spiritually, but maybe for one reason or another have a misunderstanding of Christianity. According to Barna, 63% of Americans identify as Christians. That's over 210 million people. But as anyone who is observing the world we live in today can notice, is that clearly what we see in our country and around the world rarely reflects Christian values, rarely reflects the life and actions of Jesus, and yet Christians claim to be followers of Jesus. And so I felt like it was a great way to kind of introduce this new season by just going into the basics of Christianity and really starting with what Christianity is not. So what are three things Christianity is not? Well, number one, Christianity is not a political movement. I know that there are many people who get turned off from Christianity because they assume that Christians who are involved with politics represent the church. But that is not actually true. I mean, anyone can claim to be a Christian, and for whatever reason, they may feel it is in their best interest to promote themselves as Christians for whatever they're trying to accomplish. And I'm not saying that there aren't good Christian politicians. I'm sure that there are. But Christianity was never meant to be a political movement. If it would have been, Jesus would have been the first to start it. But if you look in the Bible, you'll find a couple statements made by Jesus that really kind of put to bed this concept of Christianity having anything to do with politics. I want to invite you to look at a passage from John chapter 18, verse 36. And of course, here we have the scene here is that Jesus has been brought before Pilate. He's been accused of being a political upriser. You know, he actually was taking the place, or soon to take the place, of Barabbas, who had actually led a revolt against the Roman rule in that part of the world. And so now Jesus was about to be crucified alongside the two co-conspirators of this revolt, of this revolution, that was headed by Barabbas. And so this was generally what happened. Rome did not just crucify everyone. It was only reserved for those who were considered political threats to the stability of the empire. And so here we have Pilate interviewing Jesus as he's kind of deciding what to do with him. And in verse 36, we find Jesus answering Pilate and saying, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here." So in this statement of Jesus, he clearly lays out the principles of Christianity, that Christianity does not fight for worldly kingdoms. If Christianity has been hijacked historically to do so, that was never Jesus' original intent. And there's a reason why there's reformations that have taken place through the years, because Christianity throughout the early part of the last 2 millenniums did unfortunately get associated with political movements, particularly that of Rome. And we'll get more into that later. But if you go back to the original statements of Jesus in the early church, there was never an intent to hijack politics or to use politics in any way to bring about the kingdom of heaven here on earth. Jesus made it clear, "My kingdom is not of this world." And so what does that mean then? If Christianity is not a kingdom of this world, if Christianity is not a political movement, then what is it? Well, we have another statement by Jesus that I think sheds light on this question. And if we just go back in our Bibles to Luke chapter 17, verses 21 and 22, we have a very interesting statement by Jesus. He says here in Luke chapter 17, verse 20 and 21, he says, "Now when he was asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come, he answered them and said, 'The kingdom of God does not come with observation, nor will they say, see here or see there. For indeed, the kingdom of God is within you.'" So here Jesus clearly states that the kingdom of God was never meant to be an outward movement, a political party. It was always meant to touch the heart. And that through the heart, it was to transform individuals to be more like Jesus. And it was individuals that were living and breathing, touching and feeling, talking, representatives of Jesus here on earth, that was going to change the world. It wasn't going to be legislation. It wasn't going to be forcing people to convert against their will. Christianity cannot be forced. It cannot be legislated. According to Jesus, it is a work of the heart. And ultimately, that heart transformation leads to life in the kingdom of heaven, which is not here at this time. There's another kind of misunderstanding of Christianity that you find in the world today. And it is usually by those who kind of view Christianity on the same level as all other world religions. And so Christianity is perceived as kind of like this moral code or philosophy, or it's a way, one of many, that leads to the same place. Because Christianity, like Buddhism, like Islam, like Judaism, they all teach morality. They all teach what is right and what is wrong. And so, we have seen throughout time that some people say, yes, Christianity presents a very good ethic. And that is true. But is Christianity just a movement about ethics? Is it a movement that is just trying to make people act or behave in a certain way? Some people would call this behavior modification, right? I would say that too is a mischaracterization of Christianity. Some reasons to back that up are found in the Bible. Again, you just look at Jesus' own statement in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 20. And he says here, in his Sermon on the Mount. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, that is a very curious statement that Jesus makes, considering that scribes and Pharisees were the most morally astute, or the ones who really, tried to not just live up to a high standard, but they tried to teach that to others. And so they were highly regarded in the culture of the time as conscientious, as ones who were just always trying to do what the right thing was. And so obviously their intent was good, but the result of that was a heavy burden. People didn't feel like they could ever live up to this standard that the Pharisees and the lawyers set as far as how they should be living their lives. And in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, hey, guess what? Even their standard isn't high enough. They missed the mark even. You have to exceed even that to reach the righteousness of the kingdom of heaven. And so the point Jesus was trying to make here is that there is no way that human beings, through the right knowledge and right actions, can make themselves good. Now, Paul, a Pharisee himself, came to the same conclusion. If you go to Romans chapter 7, you find Paul kind of lamenting on his efforts to make himself good, right? He was talking about in other places how he had, if he was just measuring himself by the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, he was blameless. But then notice what happened after he realized his true condition in the light of the righteousness of Jesus. If you turn to, again, Romans chapter 7, let's look at verse 14 through verse 20. He says here, for we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. For what I am doing, I do not understand. For what I will to do, that I do not practice. But what I hate, that I do. If then I do what I will not to do, I agree with the law that it is good. But now it is no longer I who do it, but the sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is in my flesh, nothing good dwells. For to will is present with me, but how to perform what is good I do not find. For the good that I will to do, I do not do. But the evil that I will not to do, that is what I practice. Now if I do what I will not to do, it is no longer I who do it, but the sin that dwells in me. So here in this passage, we see that Paul is recognizing the reason why Christianity, seen just purely as a philosophy or a moral code, is not enough. It's not enough just to know what is right. He knew the law, but in the light of what his heart wanted to do, his heart was always in contradiction with what the law was saying. So even if he forced himself to do what was right, it really didn't match up with his spirit. And so he was saying he was living a life of misery. And there's so many people who view Christianity this way, who are suffering needlessly because they're trying to live up to this ethic on their own strength, their own power, and they make themselves miserable and they make those around them miserable. And some people call these people legalists, but really what they're trying to do, they have a good, motivation. They're not trying to be, Debbie Downers. They're just trying to do all they can to live up to this standard. And they're frustrated because they keep falling short. And that's because they misunderstand what Christianity is. All right. The third thing Christianity is not, it is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Now, I don't know how many of you played Monopoly growing up, or maybe you still enjoy it to this day, but if you play Monopoly, there was this card that you could get. Can't remember if it was out of the chance pile or the community chest pile, but one of those piles, there was a get-out-of-jail-free card, and if you collected it, you could save it. And that one time when you landed in the go-to-jail spot on the board, you could just pull that card out, and and play it, and then you'd be right back in the game again. And I think a lot of people also view Christianity as a get out of hell free card, right? And that is not what Christianity is. Christianity is not an excuse, a free pass just to say the right words one time in your life, and all of a sudden now you have a license to do whatever you want, and you're just good. You're covered. You're good to go no matter what. But Christianity was always meant to be a change of the heart, like we talked about earlier, right? And so one may say, oh, I confessed my sins, but if there is no change in the life, can one really say that they are a Christian? If you go to the story of the rich young ruler, for instance, in the book of Matthew, again, Jesus was asked this all-important question by the rich young ruler. He says, the rich young ruler came up to him in Matthew chapter 19, and he asked him, good teacher, what must I do to be saved? And of course, Jesus responded in verse 17, why do you call me good? No one is good but the one that is, God. But if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. Oh, okay. So here we have again Jesus pointing out that the commandments are actually part of what Christianity is about. Now, again, we talked about in the second misconception of Christianity, it is more than just a moral code, right? But that doesn't mean just because one cannot in their own strength live up to that moral standard that God is basically saying, well, it doesn't matter then. You can do whatever you want. And we would call that presumption, right? The presumptuous idea that, well, God has forgiven me. He's saved me, so therefore I can just continue to live my life however I want and disregard the commandments because, well, I can't live up to them anyway, and God doesn't want me to feel bad about myself, so I'm just going to feel good about myself in my sin. And Jesus is not giving a license to sin here. He's not giving a get-out-of-jail-free card. Now, of course, when we get into what Christianity is, there is an important remedy to sin that is at the core of Christianity, but it's definitely not just this concept of I can live however I want. In fact, that was really the idea of Satan in the beginning when he told Adam and Eve, hey, if you eat this fruit, you can be like God and you can do whatever you want. And I feel like sometimes this idea of Christianity puts us at the center, right? It puts me at the center. Hey, whatever I feel, whatever I want to do, that must be good because I claim Christianity. But friends, that's a deception. In fact, the Bible talks about the heart being deceitfully wicked or desperately wicked and deceitful above all things, Jeremiah 17:9. So you definitely have to realize that Christianity is not just a get-out-of-jail-free card. In fact, Jesus talked about the people that believe this and the horror that they're going to experience on the day of judgment when they find out that, no, this was never about just a wink of the eye about what we did with our lives. Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 to 23. Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. Again, the emphasis here is that a relationship with Jesus does not mean that we no longer are subject to the law of God. In fact, the two go hand in hand. They're never meant to be in conflict with one another. The problem is is that without Jesus, we don't have what it takes to keep the law, and therefore we are by nature condemned to break it. But the beautiful picture of Christianity is that God has made a way. He has made a remedy to free us from this bondage that we all live in, our own bondage, and the bondage of the world around us. And so my definition of Christianity, I think, encapsulates a full spectrum of what Christianity is. So we talked about what Christianity isn't. Christianity is not a political movement. Christianity is not a philosophy or moral code. And Christianity is not a get out of jail free card or a get out of hell free card. Christianity, and this is my definition, I didn't get it from any book or anything like that. Christianity is the belief in and the dependence upon Jesus Christ as the only solution to the penalty, power, and presence of sin. Let me say that again. Christianity is the belief in and the dependence upon Jesus Christ as the only solution to the penalty, power, and presence of sin. So we're going to be getting more into this definition in our next episode. But for now, I just want to encourage you to not give up, right? There are a lot of misconceptions out there about Christianity. And there's a lot of people claiming to be Christians who, according to the Bible, are deceivers, right? The Bible talks about people in the last days that are like wolves in sheep's clothing. And the Bible tells us that we can know them by their fruits. So no matter what they say or claim to be, we have to look at their life. And if we don't know what the fruits are, then of course we're going to be deceived. But the fruits, of course, you could look at, for instance, the fruits of the Spirit. That's one way to tell if somebody is a true Christian or not, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. If those attributes, those virtues are not being, if those virtues are not visible and demonstratable in the lives of those people who are claiming to be Christians, then hey, that should give you some pause to think about maybe what is their agenda. Maybe they are hijacking Christianity for some other reason. And of course, the obvious way to tell someone by their fruits is, again, are they keeping the commandments? If you go back to 1 John chapter 2, for instance, we don't have to question what true Christianity looks like in the life of a someone who claims to be Christian. 1 John chapter 2, and starting in verse 3, says, "Now by this we know that we know him, if we keep his commandments. He who says, 'I know him,' and does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him." Okay? So I think that this can give you a little bit to chew on between now and the next episode. Again, in our next episode, we'll go a little deeper into describing what Christianity is, and I hope that you plan on tuning in for that episode. For now, I just want to thank you for joining us on this first episode of Adventology in our new Truth Seeker series. I hope that whatever is going on in your life right now, that you will put Jesus first in your life, that you will recognize that it's only by depending on him, by trusting in him, by believing in him, that you can have true victory over the penalty, the presence, and the power of sin in your life. And we're going to, like I said, go more into that next time. For now, God bless, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode of Adventology.